The porcelain hit the wall first. Then came the scream, not the whine of a spoiled child, but something raw, something that sounded like an animal caught in a trap. 12 servants stood frozen in the entrance hall of Ashbourne Manor, staring up at a locked door, while the Duke himself gripped a half-empty glass of gin and did absolutely nothing. His 7-year-old sons were destroying themselves behind that door, and not one adult in the house had the courage to stop it. This is the story of how a scullery maid nobody respected walked into that chaos, and rebuilt a broken family with nothing but honesty, dirt, and a tin of peppermint salve. Ashbourne Manor had once been full of light. Now it felt more like a tomb. 2 years earlier, the Duchess had died suddenly, taken by a fever that swept through her in days. Since then, the Duke, a man named Arthur, had all but disappeared into his study, drowning his grief in ledgers he never read and bottles he emptied far too quickly. He left his twin sons, Leo and Harry, in the hands of a rotating parade of governesses, each one more terrified than the last. The boys weren't naughty. Naughty children stole biscuits and told fibs. These two bit. They clawed. They tore curtains from their rods and poured ink into the piano keys. They had their father's dark hair, their mother's piercing blue eyes, and a rage that seemed to live in their very bones. One governess lasted a month. The next lasted 3 days. Then there was Bridget. Bridget Hayes wasn't a governess at all. She scrubbed grates for a living, recently promoted from the sculleries because she never complained about hauling coal. She was 22, though her hands looked twice that age, cracked, red, permanently stained with ash. She didn't smile. She didn't fuss. And she certainly wasn't paid to care about 2 furious little lords. Her first encounter with the twins happened on an ordinary Tuesday. She was kneeling in a corridor, scrubbing wax from the floorboards, when the boys crept up behind her with a bucket of foul rainwater and dumped it straight down her back. They waited for tears. They waited for her to scream for the housekeeper. Instead, Bridget rose slowly, wrung out her rag, looked each boy dead in the eye, and said, "You missed a spot." Then she handed Leo the brush and walked away, boots squelching, without a single backward glance. They hated her instantly. Over the following weeks, they hid dead mice in her coal bucket, she flicked them into the fire without blinking. They rolled marbles down the servants' stairs to trip her, she simply stepped over them like debris in the street. Nothing landed. Nothing cracked her composure. And to 2 boys who had learned that chaos was the only language adults understood, her calm indifference felt like the deepest insult of all. What none of them knew was that Bridget had a sister back in the village, coughing blood into her handkerchief every night. Bridget understood grief better than anyone in that house, she just knew it didn't come dressed in velvet, throwing tantrums. It came in threadbare shoes and sleepless nights. She had no patience left for wealthy children who thought their pain was the only pain in the world. Then came the storm. It arrived on the 2nd anniversary of the Duchess's death, and the whole house felt it coming, like pressure before a lightning strike. At supper, Harry hurled his plate at the wall. When the governess reached for him, Leo bit her hard enough to draw blood. The boys fled into their mother's old drawing room, locked for 2 years, using a stolen key, and barricaded the door with a cabinet. By 9 that night, the crashing inside was almost as loud as the storm outside. Servants gathered helplessly at the foot of the stairs. The housekeeper wrung her hands. The governess sobbed into a bloodied handkerchief. And Arthur, the Duke, the father, stood at the bottom of the staircase and did nothing but drink. "Leave them," he muttered, when the housekeeper begged him to act. "If they want to tear the house down, let them. There's nothing worth saving in it anyway." Then he turned and walked away. Bridget watched him go. She looked at the crying servants, at the locked door, at a household full of grown adults too afraid to face 2 terrified 7-year-olds. Something in her chest went cold with disgust. She set down her polishing rag and started up the stairs. She didn't go through the front door. She knew a secret passage behind the fireplace, one the boys had never discovered, and she slipped through it into the wreckage of the drumline. It looked like a battlefield, shredded curtains, shattered porcelain glittering across the rug like broken ice. Leo stood in the center of it, gripping a heavy iron fire poker, blood on his knuckles from broken glass. Under a desk in the corner, Harry was curled into a ball, hands clamped over his ears, screaming himself hoarse, his lips turning faintly blue. Leo raised the poker and warned her to get out. Bridget didn't flinch. She walked straight toward him, and when he swung, she caught the poker and pulled it from his hands as easily as taking a toy from a toddler. The fight went out of him all at once. He collapsed into sobbing, pounding his small fists against her skirts, screaming that he hated her. She let him hit her. She didn't move. Then she crossed to the desk, sat down on the broken glass beside it, and pulled a small tin of peppermint salve from her apron. She didn't reach for Harry. She just opened the tin and let the sharp mint scent cut through the dust. "My sister used to scream like that when her fever got bad," she said quietly, to no one in particular. "Didn't fix anything. Just wore out her throat." The screaming stopped. One boy at a time, they came to her, not because she coaxed them, but because she was the only person in the house who hadn't run away. By morning, the Duke found his sons asleep against a maid who refused to move, for fear of waking them. That single night changed everything. Arthur, stunned by the silence, made Bridget an offer, double wages, triple wages, to become the boys' governess. She refused outright, flatly, without apology. She couldn't read well. Her penmanship was a disaster. She knew nothing of French lessons or piano scales. But she named her price anyway, £30 a year, and she would answer to no one but him. Her sister needed a doctor, and £30 meant the difference between life and death. He agreed instantly. What followed wasn't gentle. Bridget stripped the nursery of every toy the boys had ever used as a weapon and marched them outside to work, pulling weeds in the frozen kitchen garden, hauling firewood, churning butter until their arms shook. They hated it. They fought it. And slowly, without noticing, the frantic static under their skin began to quiet. There is something about cold dirt and honest labor that doesn't leave room for rage. She never lied to them. When she said something would hurt, it hurt. When she promised a baked apple for finishing a chore, the apple appeared. In a world that had collapsed around them, she became the one fixed point they could trust. When Arthur discovered his sons mucking out horse stalls, he exploded, furious that his heirs were covered in filth. Bridget didn't back down. She stepped directly between him and his own children and told him, plainly, that his sons didn't need a lord right now. They needed a father. And since he refused to be one, she would teach them the only way she knew, through work, through truth. It broke something open in him. He didn't return to his study that night. He locked himself in his room and fought his way through withdrawal alone, shaking, sweating, humiliated by his own dependence. Nobody sent him comfort. Nobody needed to. He came out the other side sober, and found his sons kneading bread dough in the kitchen with flour in their hair. Wordlessly, he rolled up his sleeves and joined them. Winter brought one final test. Harry fell violently ill with the same fever that had killed his mother, and Arthur nearly fled the room in panic, until Bridget grabbed him by the collar and forced him to look at her. "She is dead," she told him, brutal and unflinching. "But your son is alive, and if you leave now, you will lose him too." He stayed. He sang to his boy through the worst of the night, and by dawn, the fever broke. By spring, Ashbourne Manor didn't feel like a tomb anymore. The boys still argued and tracked mud through the halls, but it was ordinary chaos now, not the desperate kind. Arthur found Bridget kneeling in the garden one warm afternoon and told her that her sister's health had turned a corner. The consumption was retreating. She would live. He took her dirt-streaked hand in his without hesitation. "I'm not asking you to be their governess," he said. "I'm asking you to stay." She told him plainly she wouldn't wear silk, wouldn't learn which fork to use, wouldn't If this story moved you, give it a like, drop a comment about the moment that hit you hardest, and subscribe for more stories like this one. I'll see you in the next video.